As Kenyan officials investigate yet another terrorist attack, we'll explain why the East African nation is a target for al-Shabaab. Zimbabwe's NGOs and opponents of President Emerson Mnangagwa accuse security forces of brutalizing protesters and trampling on human rights. And the safe birth of a baby born to an Ebola survivor in the Democratic Republic of Congo is being hailed as a medical miracle. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Esther Githui Ewart in for Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. We begin our coverage tonight in East Africa, where the Kenyan Red Cross says that 19 people that were missing following the deadly terrorist attack on a Nairobi hotel and office complex are now accounted for. Some families spent hours looking for their loved ones, only to find their worst fears confirmed. Mohammed Yusuf reports from the Kenyan capital.
After a 19-hour siege on the Dusit D2 hotel and office complex, the attack was over. A few hundred meters from the scene of the assault, families, relatives and friends of those who lost loved ones gathered to identify the bodies. Margaret Ajo spoke of frantic effort made by her daughter and some friends to find Ajo's niece. In the end, her daughter had to inform the niece's family that she had been killed.
She rang the sister and told the sister, "You better come back, come in. News is not very good. Your sister is here." So she came back and found her sister there, dead.
Yasin Jama suffered the loss of two nephews who worked for an international government consulting company that has offices in the complex.
I've lost two boys. One got married the other day, and they both started working at the international agencies. But unfortunately, we have lost them.
Jama said he does not understand the motivation of al-Shabaab, the group that claimed responsibility for the attack.
The ones who brought this pain to me are carrying our name Islam. I am also a Muslim. The question I am asking, why are they killing human beings?
According to the Kenyan authorities, 4 attackers carried out the attack and all of them were killed. The attackers set off a bomb and then opened fire at people. Some of the wounded end up in this hospital. VOA caught up with the survivor minutes after he was discharged.
I tried to move away from my car when I heard an explosion and a gunfire. I got hit with a bullet. I crawled my way out of the place.
Al-Shabaab has launched attacks in Kenya since 2011, when Kenyan troops entered Somalia to fight the militant group. The Kenyan government has vowed to hunt the terror group throughout the country. Mohammed Yusuf for VOA News, Nairobi.
Once again, the Somalia-based Islamist terror group Al-Shabaab appears to be responsible for an attack in Kenya. VOA senior analyst Jeffrey Young spoke via Skype with insurgency experts who explained why Kenya is a target for Al-Shabaab.
Al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility for Tuesday's attack at the luxury Dusit D2 complex, this time saying it was in response to U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. The Somali-based militants have struck Kenya before. September 2013, nearly 70 people died when Al-Shabaab attacked the Westgate Mall in Nairobi. April 2015, more than 150 people dead at Kenya's Garissa University College from another Al-Shabaab attack. Al-Shabaab has given other reasons for past attacks in Kenya, chiefly Kenya's role in the African Union Stability Mission in Somalia. Via Skype, a senior researcher at Nairobi's Institute for Security Studies, Duncan Omandi Gumba.
These attacks, Al-Shabaab argues, are to compel Kenya to withdraw its troops from Somalia. But it is known that, of course, if Kenya had not deployed its troops in Somalia, probably the situation would be worse.
Another possible motive, Kenya police actions. Via Skype from SOAS University of London Africa analyst Michael Jennings.
I don't think the government helps itself in that it has also been accused of targeting Muslim men, in particular in coastal areas like Mombasa. It's been accused of operating a shoot-to-kill policy for those suspected of either radical sympathies or those engaged in crime. And this is alienating large parts of the Muslim community.
Kenyan police officials deny Muslim men are singled out and say officers accused of rights violations are investigated. Over the past several years, Kenya has worked to improve its information gathering on terrorist groups. Security experts say this attack shows more needs to be done. However, the answer may not lie entirely in Kenya. Again, via Skype, Duncan Goomba.
In my view, the best way to solve the problem is to empower the Somali government to once and for all get rid of Al-Shabaab, because there are reports that it has been weakened considerably.
Weakened or not, the attack on the Duzit D2 complex makes it clear that Al-Shabaab is still capable of reaching across borders to show its bloody fist. Jeffrey Young, VOA News, Washington.
In just 4 years, Kenya has been attacked by Al-Shabaab terrorists, causing massive loss of life and irreparable damage. Earlier, I spoke to Rashid Abdi, the Horn of Africa project manager for the International Crisis Group, and I began by asking him what makes Kenya such an easy target for Al-Shabaab attacks.
I think the first thing to remember is that Kenya has a long, porous border with Somalia. This border has traditionally not been very well policed, so I think there is a legacy problem which has compounded the security problem in the sense that this border is one of the most porous and poorly policed borders in the Horn of Africa, and that explains why Al-Shabaab is able to infiltrate Kenya at ease.
But Kenya is not the only regional country with forces in Somalia. Ethiopia has troops there too, and their neighboring countries as well. What is Ethiopia doing that Kenya is not?
It's a good question. I think Kenya has historically been, a very open country with a very liberal political tradition and culture. And Ethiopia, whereas Ethiopia was, a very security-minded state, it was a national security state and very strong on security. And I think because of the legacy of the Marxist-Leninist system, you also had a very local security systems which worked very efficiently, whereas that wasn't the case in Kenya. Kenya, for a variety of historical reasons, did not join that kind of Stalinist, tradition. There are, I think, differences in terms of political culture and traditions, which makes Kenya very susceptible to this kind of infiltration. If Al-Shabaab infiltrates an Ethiopian village, they will immediately be spotted, picked out, and actually, arrested. Whereas that is not going to happen in Kenya because, again, of the historical, the differences I've mentioned. Yes, Ethiopia has invested in better forms of robust border defense historically. And this relied on specialized police forces supported by the National Army. Whereas Kenya is only now beginning to step up its border defenses, which includes the building of this border fence in Mandera and other places.
So do you think, Abdi, keeping the forces in Somalia jeopardizes Kenya's security?
I think there is no doubt that as long as you have troops deployed in Somalia, Al-Shabaab will use it as a major, first of all, recruitment tool, but also secondly as a reason and a justification for their attacks in Kenya. And so, a withdrawal, in theory, will probably remove one of the major, reasons for Al-Shabaab to strike Kenya. But I think matters are much more complicated than that. Even if Kenya were to pull out its troops from southern Somalia tomorrow, I doubt whether you will see a significant scaling down of Al-Shabaab activities in Kenya. I think Al-Shabaab's strategic aim is not just to destabilize, to have the troops withdrawn, but I think also to destabilize the wider region, because they are I think their end goal is to create, Islamic states in the Horn of Africa. And so this destabilization, I think, is part of the longer-term strategic aims of Al-Shabaab. And so I think it's a bit naive to think that a withdrawal of Kenyan troops will simply satisfy Al-Shabaab and they will stop attacking Kenya.
Okay, as we speak up, the Kenyans are traumatized by Tuesday's attack at the Dusit D2 hotel and are raising questions about the country's ability to protect them. What, in your opinion, is amiss with Kenya's security apparatus?
I think terrorists need only one attack, and then the whole blame falls on the security services. I think it is important to remember that there have been a number of attacks that have been foiled in recent years. And to be fair, the Kenyan security services are getting better in terms of their response, but also in terms of their technical abilities, their competence is getting much better.
That was Rashid Abdi, Horn of Africa Project Manager for the International Crisis Group. Zimbabweans are slowly returning to the streets of Harare Thursday after 3 days of violent protests against massive fuel price hikes. The lingering effects of the protests pose a major challenge for President Emmerson Mnangagwa, who has promised to repair the tumbling economy after he replaced longtime leader Robert Mugabe, who was ousted in a November 2017 coup. Scores of civilians, including a prominent activist, are appearing in court on Thursday to face public violence charges. Now, human rights lawyers and opposition in Zimbabwe say President Mnangagwa's government is failing to respect citizens' rights by responding to protests with brutality. As Columbus Mavunga reports from Harare, security forces have arrested a prominent political activist.
Police and army vehicles patrolled the streets of Harare as Zimbabwe's protests over 150% fuel hike entered its third day Wednesday. Armed police surrounded the home of pastor and political activist Ivan Mawarine before arresting him. President Emmerson Mnangagwa's government, which succeeded Robert Mugabe's decades-long rule in 2017, pledged to respect human rights and revive Zimbabwe's moribund economy. More than a year later, critics still accuse the government of being heavy-handed with protesters.
It is everyone's right under the Zimbabwean Constitution and Universal Declaration of Human Rights to be able to express themselves in any manner they see fit. But we ask the security forces not to be excessive in their response to people exercising their freedom. Loss of life must be avoided at all costs, in particular Zimbabwean life. The solution is there. The solution is dialogue.
Zimbabwean authorities blocked the internet on Tuesday, saying citizens were using social media to spread information about the three-day strike. President Mnangagwa is in Russia as part of a five-nation visit, which ends after he attends the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, later this month.
The president urgently needs to be in this country. Other presidents who have similar issues, the president of France, the president of America, did not go to Davos. And those are the biggest economies. Those are the ones that have the money. Our fragile economy cannot afford a luxurious trip by the president to countries that I can't even pronounce, to countries that I didn't know until they said they were going there, existed on the map.
But some in the capital agree with the president's move to increase fuel prices and quell protests.
I was not happy about the protests destroying properties. It was not good. They should have done it peacefully. The way I see it, in the African region, fuel was cheapest here, so the measures he has taken are meant to be at par with the region's fuel prices. I do not see that as wrong.
More than 200 protesters have been brought to court on charges of violence, and more are expected on Thursday. Columbus Mavunga for VOA News, Harare.
Sudanese police on Thursday fired tear gas at protesters marching towards the presidential palace during demonstrations to demand the resignation of President Omar al-Bashir. Demonstrators chanting freedom, peace, justice began their march in Khartoum, but riot police quickly confronted them with tear gas. Anti-government protests that erupted across Sudan on December 19th after the government raised the price of bread have turned into daily nationwide demonstrations against Bashir's 3 decades in power. Security personnel, many in plainclothes, were seen stationed across Khartoum and along the expected route of Thursday's march. Several army vehicles mounted with machine guns were stationed outside the palace. Officials say at least 24 people have died in the protest, but Amnesty International says that more than 40 people, including children, have been killed. Now for more on the ongoing demonstrations against President Omar al-Bashir, Sudanese-American human rights advocate Azaz El-Shami joins me in the studio. Azaz, welcome for the first time on Africa 54.
Thanks for having me.
Now, what started as protests demanding, just for the price hike for bread, are now protests demanding the ouster of President Bashir. How serious are these protests? Are we likely to see a regime change?
They're quite serious because the bread prices and increase in prices, that were just the iceberg. That was just a manifestation of really ill economic policies and political decisions on the part of the government that led to that point. And when we're talking about price increase, there were even scarcity. Not only just it's expensive, it's not even available. Leading up to these protests, you would see many photos of people like in long lines for bread or for fuel. What exacerbated also that they could not even have access to their own money in banks. So basically, people felt that they have no options. Not only it's expensive, I don't even have my money to buy bread.
Emotions were already boiling.
Exactly.
And now, should Bashir be worried that this might be the end of his 30-year rule?
He should be worried, but the thing is, like, he's in denial, what it seems to me, because at this point and at this rate of participation, you pretty much, I'm not sure who left in their houses. Everybody is out. And you have today, it was really interesting to see photos from women from a very affluent part of Khartoum, Kafuri, where he lives himself. They're actually out on the street protesting. So it's expanding to include more people, more ordinary people who might be even beneficiaries of the government, but they feel like they're taking the side of the people because of the brutality and the legitimacy of the quest. Like, people are asking for legitimate things, like they need to have food, they need to have access to their money, they need to have fuel. The government had failed in conducting its job.
Now, Bashir has warrants of arrest from the International Criminal Court at The Hague, and there might not even be any discussions about a post-Bashir presidency in Sudan. What would even a post-presidency look like if there were any discussions of that nature in the country?
It depends who's discussing it. If you're talking about the government, of course, the post-Bashir, if there is any, because he seems to think that it's until death do us part. He doesn't want to let go of it while he's alive. Most of the thing he insinuated that he will only give it to a military power. So he doesn't think he will have any civilian transition of power. He would not do that. He said that in a couple of speeches. So maybe what he would offer is just kind of palace coup, agreed upon palace coup, that a military branch of the military will take over, and that will give some bargain and some way up for a Bashir.
Now, a lot of people have been killed, and this is continuing. I'm kind of even surprised that we're getting a lot of footage from Sudan because there's censorship of the media as well. You are a journalist also, yeah. You have that background. What do you make of this, and how likely are we to see even more coming out of Sudan?
You will see much more. This is the blessing of the technology. Everybody with the phone, they will take photos and they will send it. In the early days of the protest, the government throttled with the internet, making it slow. Some internet provider decided to make the internet very slow for social media platforms. But the citizen journalists in Sudan, they knew that. And more and more you will see very, very good quality videos and footages that are coming out of Sudan that I'm a part of a consortium of independent media, human rights defenders, and citizen journalists, where we're having all this information into something called Sudan Archive, where we're trying to streamline it because it's amazing. Like today, since I came, I got at least 22 videos of people. Like some of them are 20 seconds to 1 minute, and they're all like critical. They're really making sure that they document human rights violation. They're making sure that they document the masses, the number, the the scale of it. So they're really having a production line on the ground.
Azaz, thank you so much for
Thanks
your
for having
insight
me.
into what's going on in Sudan. We'll bring you right again to the studio soon. Thank you so much.
Hopefully on a happy note.
Yes,
Thank
Azaz
you.
El Shami is a Sudanese American human rights advocate. It's time now for a health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu with some good news out of DRC. Lino?
That's right, Esther. Get this. A Congolese Ebola survivor has given birth to a healthy baby in a rare case that has surprised doctors. Josephine Ikoli was infected with the virus and admitted to an Ebola treatment center supported by the World Health Organization in December 2018. 28-year-old Josephine Ikoli is relieved. Her newborn baby is healthy. Ikoli was infected with the Ebola virus last year while pregnant. She was admitted to an Ebola treatment center in Beni, in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
I had a good birth. I thank God for allowing me to have a safe birth. Now I recovered, I do not have any diseases and the baby was born healthy. I'm very grateful for the great work that the team is doing.
With treatment, Ikoli recovered and gave birth to a healthy baby girl. In the past, the survival rates for pregnant women infected with Ebola and for their babies was very low. Babies born to mothers with Ebola are usually already infected with the virus and often die. During the latest outbreak, however, medical experts have witnessed some different outcomes.
I knew that they were following some women who appeared to be survivors of Ebola who were still carrying a healthy pregnancy. This was something that was close to unheard of in the last epidemic, and so that was really something exciting to see a woman give birth to a child after it appears that she survived Ebola.
The World Health Organization says the baby is the first to be born Ebola-free to a mother who was previously infected with Ebola. Medical assistant Dr. Junior Ikomo runs the treatment center at the Alliance for International Medical Action. He says both mother and baby will continue to be closely monitored.
Nous avions prélevé que chez le nouveau-né, nous avons prélevé chez le...
We did a blood test on the baby, and we also took samples from the mother. We took a sample of the amniotic fluid. We fear that the virus may have been released, and after lab tests, the results came back negative. The results were surprising and intriguing from a scientific point of view.
The DRC has suffered 10 Ebola outbreaks since the virus was discovered in the country in 1976. The virus spreads through contact with bodily fluids and causes hemorrhagic fever with severe vomiting, diarrhea, and bleeding, and is often fatal. Esophageal cancer in the long, hollow tube that runs from your throat to your stomach is one of the most frequently reported malignancies and a leading cause of cancer death around the world. Most cases are reported in developing countries. Early esophageal cancer typically causes no signs or symptoms. However, the chemical markers of the disease are present even in the earliest stage. And a new device being tested in Britain takes advantage of that to allow early detection and other types of cancers. Here's VOA's Faith Lapidus.
Sensors originally developed for detecting explosives and toxic gases have been reprogrammed to identify the chemical markers of cancer. The breathalyzer, created by Owlstone Medical, can detect and identify multiple chemicals in a gas flow at very low concentrations, typically parts per billion. The 1,500 people in the clinical trial will wear a special mask fitted with collection tubes and breathe normally for 10 minutes. Lead investigator Rebecca Fitzgerald says it's a simple procedure.
These tubes, simple though they look, this is one of the things that's made a real difference in this technology looking so promising, because for the first time, the chemicals that are breathed out in the breath can be collected in these tubes and immediately stabilized. So as you keep breathing, you're capturing more and more of those chemicals, and you're building up a profile of the chemicals in your body that have been exhaled on the breath.
The tubes are then sent to Owlstone's lab, where the volatile organic compounds in the breath are analyzed. Those VOCs, as they're called, are produced by the body's normal metabolism. Changes in metabolic activity can produce particular patterns of VOCs, which can be biomarkers of specific diseases. By picking out minute traces of cancer, Owlstone's co-founder Billy Boyle says treatment can begin early with a greater chance of success.
The challenge is most people present when it's very late stage, and it's about managing symptoms as opposed to curing them. So the key thing that you can do is detect the disease early, and that's what we think the breathalyzer technology allows for, picking it up at that earliest stage when it's treatable.
The trial is currently limited to patients with suspected esophageal and stomach cancers, but will be extended later to include patients with other cancers. And doctors will be watching the 2-year trial closely. Faith Lapidus, VOA News.
Now, scientists have found a connection between excessive social media use and behavior associated with substance abuse. The researchers at America's Michigan State University and Monash University in Australia had 71 participants take the Iowa gambling task used to measure decision-making abilities in substance abusers and non-abusers. They found that heavy social media users took greater risks even while knowing that they came with negative consequences, the same way drug addicts do. The participants also reported that they constantly think about the platforms when not using them and that they lose sleep because of their online activities. The experts say social media has tremendous benefits for individuals, but can constitute a problem when people cannot pull themselves away. They say more needs to be done to better understand this drive and determine if excessive social media use should be considered an addiction. And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter @Lenore Moudou. Back to you, Esther.
Thanks, Lenore. Be sure to watch for Lenore Moudou's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching, and good night from Washington.